Marketer of the Day, Episode 516. Simple creative marketing. Build a foundation. Expert, repurpose, and go big in your content marketing with Anfernee Chansamooth.
Hey everyone, we're so glad you're listening to the Marketer of the Day podcast. You caught us in the middle of a conversation with Anfernee Chansamooth, and Anfernee is he's a virtual chief marketing officer and authentic influence podcast host, and he's the founder of Simple Creative Marketing, which you can find at simplecreativemarketing.com. And Anfernee helps emerging leaders to clarify and build their authentic brands, their income, and their influence online. And Simple Creative Marketing focuses on simplifying marketing for growth startups. So we're all excited to hear what that's all about. So Anfernee, glad to be talking to you.
Thanks for the invitation, Robert.
Well, you're very welcome. So Simple Creative Marketing, what are you guys all about and what's your focus? What makes you stand out?
So really we're all about just taking something that potentially is very, very confusing for a lot of people and then simplifying the steps to helping small businesses and startups really acquire leads online.
Okay, so instead of them, doing goofy startup stuff like making t-shirts or making silly commercials or viral videos, they're instead focusing on what will actually bring them money, right?
Exactly right. So we've got this tagline, which is focus on what actually matters, because it's very easy for startups to get caught in 1,000 different ideas and ways to market, whether it's online or offline. You mentioned t-shirts. T-shirts can work. Like there are, for some brands that they work really well. But there's also a foundation that business owners and founders need to understand in terms of there's proven, I don't like calling them formulas, but there's proven foundational steps for building a digital presence. And when you're struggling to make it work because you're sort of chasing after every opportunity, what we do is we deliver a framework and say, well, hey, if you just follow, use this, we call it a marketing mix, right? So you can choose what you want to go with, but essentially we condense the process and say, let's just do one thing and focus on one thing for the next 3 months. And typically we're looking for the one thing that's going to double the amount of leads you're getting, let's say in the next 6 months. Okay, so we go through a process to help founders really identify and prioritize what they should be doing next.
I love it. And I think that we can all relate to having too many good ideas. And if we don't have a good plan, a good strategy, then it's really easy to fall into that trap to fall into of having 10 projects happening at the same time. They're all 10% complete. And if we had only just focused on the one that had the best chance of success or the most leverage, then we could just get that done and move on to the next. But it's really tempting to chase every single bright, shiny object and think, I'm plugging away every single possible place I can plug away to. And so, to help us fully understand this, do you have any interesting stories or case studies, such as a before and after, of maybe a startup that they have this problem we're describing where their focus is so scattered, so split, and you came in and you said, no, people, you have to just do this one thing. Do you have any interesting stories like that where you set some company straight?
Absolutely. So one of our clients, they basically came to us after they had already hired a social media agency to run social campaigns for them. And they had essentially paid thousands of dollars to an agency to schedule content out or curate content out through their social feeds using some kind of platform that they had developed. Now, the one question I asked in the initial consultation was, okay, you paid these guys for 6 months. How many leads or how many clients have you actually acquired? And guess what the answer was? Zero. Right? So big fat zero. And I said, okay, well, how about we just focus on producing quality content? So we specialize in content marketing. That's my background. I've been a writer, I wrote for Huffington Post and different media publications for a number of years now. And I used to work when I was working as a full-time marketing manager in a co-working community, that's a lot of what I was doing, was developing the content strategy, working with a team to develop it and deliver it. And so I basically said, okay, well, let's look at your content. Let's do a review on what you've been putting out there. One thing that was very transparent was the content that the agency was putting out was not the client's content. It was actually stuff that they were finding, from Inc.com and sort of the common pieces that the other people were throwing around and resharing and retweeting anyway, right? So we said, if you're going to build profile, then you need to be putting out your own stuff. And that needs to be, at least 80% your own stuff, and then 20%, it's okay to share other people's work and add your commentary to it, but you really need to focus on producing your own quality content. So we did that, and we combined that with an actual plan to deliver the content in front of their target audience. So they're in the B2B space, like all our clients. We focus in on the business to business, and professional services is sort of where we specialize. And so we said, okay, well, LinkedIn is somewhere where you definitely need to play because a lot of your audience is there. And we got into consistent publishing of long form and short form content, but we were specifically targeting the pain points of their audience, right? So in this case, what he does, he helps. He's got a membership program that supports people who are leaving corporate or have left corporate to start their own businesses, and he basically helps them go from 0 to 30K per month income through their startup, right? So we basically really nailed the pain points, put it up on LinkedIn. We worked through a series of posts and status updates on LinkedIn and articles, and it took us a couple of months to get there, but just around November last year, we had 70,000 views across 3 posts in 30 days for that client, which generated into multiple sales appointments and a couple of clients. So there was a couple of wins on the back end of that. I won't talk numbers because that's a bit private to the client, but that's an example of what happens when you get real focus on your content strategy and you're aligning, your message to your market, and you're going to where they are, and you're dropping everything else, which is really a distraction.
I love it. And that's really refreshing to hear about the way that you pulled that off, because a lot of the times when you hear about content marketing, you hear about the quantity over quality, right? You hear about sort of like what you alluded to in the beginning of that story there, where sometimes people will grab other content, or they'll spin it, or they'll just be focusing on the numbers, and they'll blast like just all the garbage and hope that something sticks. But instead you said, well, we're going to focus on these 3 LinkedIn posts and really make that work. So, I mean, are you seeing any missed opportunities like this? Like, I mean, LinkedIn, I keep hearing about all these just huge things that I've been missing out on that I need to go investigate. But like, as far as the companies that you see, and like as far as the content marketing opportunities, are you seeing a lot of missed opportunities, such as LinkedIn and other places, wherever you look?
Absolutely. Like, I think something that is probably missed a lot is companies will focus on the sort of top 4 or 5 social platforms, and they miss other opportunities. So Quora is a platform that we put some of our clients on, because there's that's a great place you can go for Q&A. People ask questions there all the time, and if you can, so here's the thing: what we did with this LinkedIn test that we did this client, we also took the same content and we threw it on Medium, we threw it on Quora. we essentially repurposed the content, so you went into different places, and we also did a podcast outreach program and helped the client get onto a series of podcasts, which also then helped attract new audiences to what they were doing. Okay, so talking about missed opportunities, I think a really big missed opportunity is just to be able to repurpose your content in a way that it can reach more people. I think a lot of founders produce, a good quality content, but they're not putting it in. They're not doing enough work to really get it out there. and to get it in front of the right audiences. So like I've seen that, guest post strategy where people will go and take shop around a piece of content and trying to get it into different blogs and whatnot. But a lot of that effort and time, just understand that guest posting is a long process, and you need to allow time for that to work. Blogging as a process, it takes time as well. Usually, I always reset my clients' expectations around how long this stuff is going to take, because they think, oh yeah, we can make it happen in 30 days. And realistically, 90% or 90+% of marketers won't be able to nail it in 30 days unless they've got ad spend to really put behind the content to amplify it. And when I say amplify, that means we're driving traffic through, social ads, Facebook ads, LinkedIn ads, whatever it may be, to get in front of the audience. But typically the clients I work with don't have those kind of budgets where we can just throw 5K onto Facebook ads, right? So that's why we really focus on, they already have a business, but they don't necessarily know how to reach their audiences.
Okay, yeah, and that makes perfect sense that that your clients might not have the resources to dump tons of money at it and to run all these ads, but there are still avenues that we can take. And what I'm hearing a lot of as like a common thread of what you and I are talking about, it sounds like that it's really important to have, it's fine to be creative and to think outside the box, but to do that within a proven structure, right? Because it's tempting for these startups to say, let's make some crazy content or do some crazy thing. And you're saying, well, we can do that, but let's first be practical and let's find a platform that makes sense. And then we can be crazy with the content on LinkedIn or on Quora. And we can be outside the box as far as proven ways to market ourselves. And you're making me realize here about a lot of different missed opportunities of all these websites, because as you know, there's a ton of websites out there and some of them are super huge, but we forget they're there despite them being super huge, because it's easy to think, oh, there's YouTube, there's Facebook, but then there's, like you said, there's Quora, there's Medium, and you're even making me thinking as far as for me marketing my podcast, I always forget that SoundCloud is there, right? Where I can post some episodes there. I always forget that I can post my episodes on YouTube or iHeartRadio or Spotify. And so I like how you're thinking outside the box here, but also being practical. And so as you're explaining, okay, well, we took the content, put it on Quora or went to Medium. How did you come to that conclusion? How do you say, well, you're this company and you should be marketing here? Is it a matter of you being aware of these sites, or do you check out competitors? How did you land on the conclusion to say, let's post on Quora, let's post on Medium?
So we do a couple of things. We do competitor analysis, but we don't spend too much time there because it's good to know where your top players are, what they're doing, and identifying what their strengths are. So one thing that we do is a simple SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. If you're not aware of the concept, and we basically just run the client through. Okay, well, for each of let's name the top 3 competitors that you're aware of, and we'll do our own research in the back end to see, if there are other competitors that the client is not aware of in the markets they're in. So, and then we'll look at, okay, well, who's the target audience? As I mentioned, for this particular client, they're going after sort of startups in the second year, second or third year in. They're already making, say 5K a month, but they're trying to sort of double that or get to the 30K a month revenue. So we say, okay, well, where do this audience hang out, right? So that's a question we sort of probe and explore with the client, and in many cases we've got a list of platforms that we're aware of, but then we also sort of search. We've got an SEO expert that we work with, and he does some background search into forums. So there are a bunch of forums that are out there that are sort of, you got to register to get into it, and they're behind the scenes sort of thing. And so he'll come back and say, look, here's a bunch of 2 or 3 or whatever number of forums where your audience, it'd be good for you or your client to go in there and really start building relationships within that forum. Because it's all about building trust and respect and sharing great content, useful content, and that's what we would advocate to the client. And then we start testing. So as you would know, Rob, it's all a series of tests and experimentation. And we say we're going to test this for 60 days, and then we'll do review and we'll determine whether we move forward or we cut it, right? So you mentioned podcasts, and you are running a podcast, and one of our clients we just went through a process of coming up with a podcast methodology or a sequence for them. Do you want me to share that with you? Like, I think that would be useful for anyone who wants to do a podcast. But essentially,
let's do it.
Yeah. So essentially their challenge was just understanding. They would do a ton of things, man. Like, they were doing webinars, they were creating a weekly podcast, they were blogging, they were doing social stuff, they were guest posting. It's just spread really thin. And we just said, we worked with them. They came to us and said, well, how can we simplify all this? And I said, well, it was actually their idea to say, well, let's simplify. And I said, okay, well, how about if we just do this? You record a podcast, you send it. We get that podcast transcribed. We take the transcription, we send it to our content team. They'll turn it into long form content. Podcast goes up on iTunes, goes up on your blog, goes through your newsletter, out to your email list. We then take the podcast, we add some visuals to it, we throw it onto YouTube. So now you're building that YouTube, because that's where people go to search. That works. And then we also then cut it and we put it into different social channels, right? The transcription we take, we get our writers to rewrite the interview into an actual blog post that goes into LinkedIn Pulse, because we know that LinkedIn is working the best for this client. And now all we've done is taken one piece of content, which is the initial audio recording, and then we've turned it into putting it out through 5 or 6 different channels. Okay, so that's just a sort of an idea of what you can do, and all the client has done, like in terms of the amount of work they've had to do, they've just had to record the interview. Okay, so once they pass it to us, we become a content machine, and then we push it all out to different places. Does that sort of give you an idea of how you can get more specific with what you're doing, and then leverage it as best as you can?
Yeah, that is super cool, and it sounds like you and your team have a well-oiled machine there, because I don't know about you, but I've come across a few of these marketers who really have their content dialed in, and I go and I check out everything they have to offer, and I follow them on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and then after a while, and like their podcast, YouTube, everywhere, and after I follow them for a while, I realize, oh yeah, they were talking about this week. And then the same information showed up on all the platforms, but it was always a little bit different. So yes. Here I was thinking I had to tune into every single platform. But as I did, I realized the thing I watched on Facebook Live shows up on their YouTube. And then there was a LinkedIn article that was not quite the same, but rewritten by a team. And so it really clicked for me that even these huge marketers that appear on every single platform, it's not like they're inventing something new every single place. They're talking in one location, and then a team is going and replicating or massaging the content to wherever it needs to show up there. And then another thing that so there's that component there of it, like the content's there in one place and shows up everywhere else. And then so I see a lot of these people who are doing this, and it's making a lot of sense where they just talk one place and it shows up just everywhere else, and as opposed to like they're not doing all this different work. And I've seen some people who point number 2 here is that I've seen people where they've complained to me before about how they've been lost in the content. So I've seen people where they say, oh, I'll just outsource all of my social media, and then they put out all this garbage that is not their message. But that was because they weren't actually being like the source of the content, right? They weren't creating that initial audio recording, podcast, interview, whatever. They were just saying, create some stuff for me. So it sounds like there's 2 parts of it, right? You need the team to amplify what you're doing, but also you need to be the source of the content. That way the content team is creating what you're talking about this week and not just making stuff up. Is that on the right track?
You've nailed it. Like it's, I hear it time and time and again. It's founders or leaders saying, what have I really got to say? And they question, they self-doubt their value and all the experience they've built over the years and what they've studied or whatever it may be. And that's talking about missed opportunities. The opportunity here is we're living in a time where we have access to all these platforms and channels. You couldn't do this 15 years ago when the only channel we had channels were TV and radio and billboards, right? And unless you had big budgets, to invest in those type of advertising, you couldn't do it. But now you can, and you have a voice and you have expertise. And sure, this. If you're a digital marketer like me and perhaps like you, Rob, there's only so much that we can say about SEO or Twitter or Facebook or whatever it may be. But it's your experience which is the important part, and that's the part I think people miss out on. It's understanding, okay, well, we did this, and it's not about you sharing always the successes. It's actually about sharing the process. How do you do your experiments? What did you learn throughout the process? Gary Vaynerchuk, as many marketers will know, he's got this sort of mantra, which is document. Document, don't create. I think this is what he says. It's all about just documenting the process as you go and sharing the insights along the way. And that's something that I'm getting my clients to get into a habit of and saying, look, it's not about, don't just wait until you've got the final result. Like when you've got those, perfect, they're wonderful. But what people want to know is not how you got that client to generate 100K revenue. That not just that happened, but what were the steps along the way? Where did you fail? Because a lot of times we learn from the failures. Yeah, and if you can highlight, well, along the way we actually failed five different ways that we failed throughout that experience, and you might want to learn from this. That actually can then help someone else speed up their process, and they go, "Oh shit, we better not do that thing," right? So, does that sort of answer the question, Rob?
Yeah, it does. In that, and I've heard that too. Document, don't create, and like a lot of advice from marketers, you can always take that to mean multiple different things, right? It can mean like document, don't create means it's an endless source of content, because if you had a problem with a client or if you saw things happening in your industry that you didn't like, that's fodder for content. If you have a set of procedures, checklists, things that are working for you, that could become a course or a product, as opposed to you trying to make everything bright and shiny and neat and say nothing will ever go wrong and let me just give you some PowerPoint presentations. Well, that's not really helpful. What is helpful is seeing things happening. And I like how it sounds like a lot of your thought process here is, I keep hearing the word experiments. Like you'll go and you'll try something out and you'll measure it and you'll say, okay, well, we gave that 90 days and we tried something new and we'll measure how that worked for us. So, I mean, yeah, that makes perfect sense right there. And it relates a lot into maybe the past, I don't know, year or so, as far as the content marketing, the selling, the webinar content, all that stuff, is that I've been realizing more and more that it's not always about how to, right? Like I used to think that if I put out content, whether it was on a blog or free or whatever, I felt like if it didn't have step-by-step, that it was a total waste. And now I'm realizing that if we only focus on the step-by-step how-to, we're focusing on a small percentage of the population, but some people just want to see that you made mistakes and it's okay. Or maybe they're listening to our episode on the podcast right now and they just want to hear like a quick tip and they just want to get one or two things out of it. They don't want to get the whole big picture. So I'm realizing quite a bit of that in that, you might share an interesting story about how you helped a client, and that might serve a purpose where someone sees that on LinkedIn and they say, well, Anfernee, he helped this person with their YouTube or their core marketing. Now I'm going to listen to him more. Now I'll join his list. Now I'll buy from him. I don't necessarily need to get all the steps right out of the gate, right off the bat, but just there's different, I don't know, like there's different times when people might have that aha moment, or they might just hear an interesting story and they might get what they need at that current moment in time. They don't always need like the fire hose, the big checklist of all the stuff. So that's what I'm hearing from you today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that relates to where, if we talk about your target audience and your buyers, not everyone is at that red, fire mode where they're like, okay, this is a really painful problem and I need it solved right now, or actually I need it solved yesterday. right? So that's probably, if we talk about traffic coming to your website, that's probably less than 10% of the traffic coming there are people who actually want to buy or ready to buy. So now what we're neglecting is the other 90%. Okay, so what are they wanting? Well, a lot of them are probably in research mode. All right, and maybe they are problem aware. They know they've got a certain thing that they want to resolve, and they've somehow found you, whether they've heard your podcast or seen you on social media, or someone else mentioned you, or whatever it may be, or you've really done your SEO well, and then Google's sort of sending traffic to you. So, but not everyone's ready to buy. So what can you do? So what they're looking for is, do I like this founder or this business? Do they have case studies on their website that really cement the fact that they've produced results? Are they, in terms of what they're putting out on social, the show personality that I can relate to? Are they fun? Are they engaging? No, not everyone has to be fun. You have to. This is an important part here. Is you have to stick to who you are as a business, as a brand, as a person, and it's not about you trying to replicate someone else's model, right, or their personality, because there are people who will resonate with who you are as a business and as a voice, and the more you stick to who you are, the more you're going to endear yourself to the right people, and that's a key part of it. So in our starting stage with our clients, we always talk about what's your brand voice, what's your personality, what's your tone, and who are the people who you work with who can relate to that, right? Because we're going to have to now speak that language and stick to that, because once you deviate, then you start to lose. It's like you're diluting your own message, right? And that's, you lose power in doing that. So what we're really talking about here is storytelling, and the ability to really hone in on your storytelling skill. There's a ton of talks on YouTube or on TED Talks, around storytelling, and I highly recommend people check that out. And one of them, sort of a big one that stands out for me, is Start With Why by Simon Sinek. He does a talk about how leaders inspire action. And that one's a good one I would recommend people to really dig into. And it's about purpose. So we always talk about, well, what's the business really all about? Like, what's the podcast about? Why are you doing this? And if you need to be able to answer that with conviction, and you need to constantly be reminding people that's why you're doing it, because the people who are going to buy from you are the people who resonate with why you're doing it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That don't just put out the podcasts or the YouTube videos or the LinkedIn posts. Don't just put it out for the heck of it. You have to have that real message and be authentic and deliver on what your customers want. So that way you're not just all over the place. And it sounds like a team like what you and your company has is exactly what a lot of people need. If maybe they're spending a lot of wasted time playing around with social media and just playing around, right? They're putting things out there, but not actually measuring and not getting it to results. And maybe they're not being consistent about it and not being deliberate with it and not being the next Gary Vee or Tim Ferriss or whoever. They're not actually putting things out there with a real plan. So it sounds like a lot of people out there, if they're frustrated with not putting out enough content or the right content, and it sounds like you and your team are a really good fit for what some people want. So can you explain for us, who is an ideal fit for you and your company, and where can people find out more about the services you guys provide?
All right, so let me just share sort of the 5 key challenges that small businesses face. I'll run through them quickly because I'm aware of time. But the first one is prioritization. So, are you clear on what activities to do and in which order to really maximize your return on investment, right? And this is that making sure you don't fall into the shiny object syndrome, right? The second one is lacking marketing expertise in-house. So there are some really great business ideas and businesses out there, but they just don't have someone, maybe the founder's not a marketer. Maybe what they're really strong at is their product or service or their audience, and they're able to solve those problems, but they don't know how to do marketing and never really learned how to do it. So my question is, can you afford not to hire someone, whether it's full-time or part-time, to help drive that marketing forward, and work with a team to do it? The third one is misalignment between marketing and sales. If you're, if you're doing marketing but it doesn't help you sell, or if you're doing sales and in your sales you don't feed what you're learning in terms of challenges and objections from clients back to marketing, then you're really missing opportunities for you're missing revenue targets and you're missing growth opportunities. Okay. Number 4 is lack of systems and process, and this is why team is so important. Because let me give you some insight into what our team looks like. Realistically, it's me. I operate as the outsourced marketing manager, which is what a CMO is, Chief Marketing Officer, and then I have a team of contractors around me and strategic partners who deliver on different elements, right? So we've got an SEO expert that we work with. We've got a graphic designer who does graphics and brand. We've got someone who does social. We've got someone who we've got a team of writers and editors who produce content. So, and we sort of, depending on the mix that's required, we then we partner with them to deliver for the client. In most cases, the clients we work with are sort of in around the sort of $500,000 through to about $4 or $5 million in revenue, annual revenue, and they've typically got a team of 2 to 10 already, and at least one sort of virtual admin that or an admin person that can help deliver a lot of the execution. So we help them systemize and with the tools and also the processes, so that they can, at the end of the day, my objective is so then they don't need me moving forward. After 12 months, ideally, they will get to a point where they say, well, wow, we've got the system in place now. We actually don't need you, Ann. See you later, right? Or, shit, we just really love that we have you, and then we want to continue the engagement, okay? So it goes either way. And then the last one is insufficient data, and this is a big one. So how can you make smart decisions about what you're doing with your budgets and your time and your allocation of resource if you don't have data to support or give you, enough information to make those decisions, right? A lot of us are flying by the seat of our pants, and this is why we get into problems, because we might spend, a couple $100 here on Facebook and then a couple $100 there, and that all adds up, all right? So especially when you talk about thousands of dollars. So we basically work with our clients to tackle those 5 different issues and build a strategy around that.
I love it. And just to recap those 5 key challenges for our listeners, we have number 1, prioritization, to make sure that we're doing the right activities in the right order to maximize our return on investment. Number 2, marketing expertise, because you might be a startup out there and you might be super passionate about getting a water supply in the Congo or something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good marketer. No offense to anyone listening, but you might need a marketing expert who's done this their entire lives or for decades, so that way that they can apply their magic secret sauce, their rocket fuel to what it is you're doing. And number 3, there could be a misalignment in your marketing and your sales, right? Because there might be some certain objections that you keep seeing over and over in the sales area, but if that doesn't propagate back to the marketing and disarm people with their objections, that needs to be fixed. Number 4, system and process. So it's one thing to go ahead and do something once, but you need to have a team that does it consistently over and over again, and maybe hook up with different strategic partners, because it's easy to say, I'm going to post on Instagram once or Facebook once, but to have a team to make sure that it happens every single time, that's a whole other story. And then number 5, insufficient data, that we might not know the number of clicks coming in from here or what to do there to make the right decision. So we need to have all those 5 key challenges taken care of. And so it sounds like you and your team can do that. And I like the scenario that you laid out there, where it doesn't have to be an ongoing thing, right? You can swoop in and you can work your magic and get the systems in place so that hopefully they don't need you. But if they like the boost you've given to their business, to their startup, they'll want to have you around again and again. Is that right?
Exactly right. So the big benefit of why the CMO service is hot right now is some people might have heard of a chief financial officer or a virtual CFO, and they basically do essentially the same service, but they focus on the numbers, right, for the business owner. But for us, we're focusing on the marketing, right? And a lot of startups, certainly the ones that we work with, are at the stage where they can't hire a full-time marketing person in the business. So what they're looking for is, and they don't really want to, go to Upwork or the freelance sites and work with freelancers, because that it's a waste. It's not a waste, but it takes a lot of time to find the right person, the right people to work with. And there's a question around quality there, because if you're paying really cheap rates, what are you going to get? And we always say you get what you pay for. And so for us, it's like we sort of sit in the middle. We go, well, you can actually what about you work with someone who's had who's had a decade of marketing experience, but you're not paying $70,000, $100,000, $150,000 a year to do it, and then at any time you can fire us if we're not getting you the results. You can just say, well, see you later, and go find someone else, right? But the access that we also give to the client is our trusted supplier network, right? So that's just the marketing person. But what about the SEO person and the social person and the brand person and the graphic designer and the content writer? So we basically bring that entire network, our team and an extended team to you, right? And that just saves the business owner a ton of time and headaches trying to find each one of those suppliers themselves.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That it's like option number one is to hire some full-time person, and who knows what you're getting there. And now that's like a whole new thing to take on. Option number two is to go on Fiverr or Upwork. But again, who knows what you're getting? It might be cheap, but who knows if they even know what they're talking about. And then option number three would be to build out a whole huge arm of the business and hire this person for SEO, this person for graphics, this person for content marketing. And all three of those options, to be honest, sound like they really suck. And what they should do instead is hire you and your team. That way they're just hiring one single person. They can cut you loose at any time. And then you go and look at things from both sides of the coin, right? You can look at things from a strategic view, but also hire whoever else needs to be hired out. That way it's like, it's just you. That way they don't have to deal with this huge headache. So this sounds like you guys have filled in the gap here that exists with startups trying to market things online. So where can people find out more or pull the trigger with all this stuff?
All right. So just head on to www.simplecreativemarketing.com. And then there you can access our framework. And also I've just completed a 5-step growth blueprint, which people can take a look at. And that sort of runs through the sequence that we move our clients through. And you can do that for yourselves, even if you don't hire us. That's fine.
Super awesome. So simplecreativemarketing.com is the place to dip your toe in the water and figure out where you're missing out. Figure out where you have those untapped opportunities where you need to be focusing on your online marketing in whatever capacity that is. And if you're ready to pull the trigger, is there an easy way to do that once they find that website? There's like a contact form or something where they can reach out and maybe deliver their needs to you and figure out if a deal can be made? Is there an easy place for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the homepage, when you land on there, there's a big button that says book a 15-minute strategy call. That's complimentary. So if you want to jump on a quick call with me, we'll run through what your challenges are and whether we're a fit, because we're not everyone is going to be a fit. And so that's probably the best way to pull the trigger.
Super great. And as you know, Anfernee, like it doesn't make any sense to delay 3 months, 6 months, 12 months just researching it. It helps to just get on that phone call, figure it out in a few minutes, in 15 minutes or less, if things can move forward, if there's something to be figured out. So everyone should go right now to simplecreativemarketing.com, book that free 15-minute strategy call, and figure out where things are at. Figure out if you need Anfernee and his team to get you to where you need to go. And I mean, at the very least, he'll give you a few cool ideas about what things that need to happen next. And hopefully, fingers crossed, you will willingly and gladly hire Anfernee and his team over at simplecreativemarketing.com to get your business where it needs to go. I mean, you might have the best idea in the world, but imagine if Facebook existed and no one knew about it. Imagine if YouTube or Uber or whatever existed, nobody knew about it. You need to take your marketing seriously, and the place to take that seriously is simplecreativemarketing.com. So go there right now, simplecreativemarketing.com, and we'll see you there. And thanks so much, Anfernee, for stopping by and for being honest and maybe a little blunt and brutal with us, which I appreciate, and telling us what we need to know about where we may be missing the boat and have these missed opportunities and need this outside team to tell us and show us where we should focus our marketing and traffic efforts. So that way, for those people out there who have a startup and a really great idea that maybe can even change the world, it doesn't die, it doesn't fail. People hear about it. So I appreciate what you and your company provides. And I appreciate you stopping by and being super honest about what you have. So thanks for that.
You're welcome, Rob. Thanks for the questions. And it's been a great conversation.
Subscribe to us right now while it's still fresh on your mind at marketeroftheday.com